emeritus president and former CEO of North American Plastics, one of the largest plastics distributors in North America, housing 87 different brands. Now, before his time there, he has spent 20 years in the chemical distribution industry and across several different senior executive leadership positions. And prior to that, he served 7 years in the Marine Corps on active duty and a total of 30 years in the Marine Corps, including as a reservist. Between his Marine Corps life, his time in his corporate life, and his family life, he also found time to attend law school. But now, without further ado, please help me welcome Mark Kramer.
Well, thank you very much. It is wonderful to be here and a thrill to get this adjusted correctly. And a thrill to have a chance to speak to so many of you students yesterday and today. I am awed by the view. I don't know how this is going to work, that I can speak with you. If I have most of my time oriented this way, you'll know why, so I can concentrate. It's a wonderful view. And I am energized that so many of you would take a portion of your free Friday to come to this room and think about the subject of leadership. For the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to dive into what that subject is all about. And in my view, it is the magic elixir. It is the difference maker. It is why organizations succeed and fail. It's why teams win and lose. It's why people at an individual level often succeed or fail. And I would offer one challenge. And that is, as you sit here today, if you truly open your mind to the art and science of what leadership really is, and you reflect on it, you study it, and you embrace it, you will never ever be the same again. You will never look at someone on TV the same way. You'll never look at your government leaders the same way. You will be in a position to critique, evaluate, and make determinations about your corporate leaders, your community leaders, everyone you engage with. Because this is, you see, a lifetime event. You don't study leadership, learn it, and then do it. It's a lifestyle. You commit to it. You study it 24/7, 365. It becomes who you are, what you do, and the very essence of everything you project. And for those that are thrilled by that possibility, the good news is you can do it for the rest of your life. And for those that don't want to embrace that, you nonetheless have the opportunity to learn more about it and to become familiar with what good versus not so good leadership looks like. And so today, this is obviously a huge field, a huge arena. Google leadership or leadership training or leadership thought, and you come up with 65 million returns. I mean, people have written about this for ages, right? I'd like to approach it from an angle that I have a little bit of familiarity with, and that is to say that through a 30-year career in the Marines, I think I was exposed to some of the best leadership training, leadership thought, leadership methods and tactics that there are. And it makes sense. The consequences for success and failure in the Marines are obviously very dire. But then the question becomes, what's the application of all of those concepts, if any, to the business world? And that's what I'd like to explore with you this morning. What can we learn, A, about leadership in general that sets the stage for what we want to consider? What do the military do that, especially in the Marine Corps, makes them such effective leaders? And then what are the principles that can be carried over without offending anyone, without warping anyone's sensibility, to how business can conduct itself better? I think it's a pretty fascinating study, and I hope at the end of 30 or 40 minutes you'll agree. So let's dive into it. I want to ponder some things to set the stage for why this discussion, why this room, and why your time here is important. Why is it, do you think, that so many companies deal repeatedly with the same problems year after year? Why do you think so many meetings seem boring, uneventful, uninteresting? Why does such a high percentage of the workforce across the country in so many industries choose to change jobs? Right? Why do once powerful brands fail? Why do companies go out of business? Why do so many superstars change teams, whether it's in pro sports, business? Why do so many of the most talented people seem to have trouble landing where they can spend a fair amount of time? And according to some statistics that the Wall Street Journal would have published, how come 75% of all acquisitions fail to add net value to shareholders after they're done. Now you can go off on a tangent that says it's the market, it's the economy, it's the globalism, it's the, it's the products, it's the way society's evolving, it's the millennials, it's blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, when you peel the layers of the onion back, I submit that in almost every one of those cases, you're going to find that there was a failure of leadership. There was a failure to inspire, a failure to train, a failure to motivate, a failure to see around corners, a failure to think through potential problems, a failure to plan correctly. That's what leaders do. That's why organizations succeed. That's what creates the durability that allows organizations to survive economies, cycles, trends around the globe, changes of age, and so forth amongst consumers. Right? What do these leaders say to you? And I put some pictures up. Some of the most famous leaders, quote unquote, in the world in this page. Some not so famous, some infamous. But what do you get as a visceral reaction when you say, wow, I know that Bill Belichick obviously is a winning football coach, but have you ever thought about him as a leader? I know Mother Teresa was a great humanitarian and did magnificent things for millions of people all over the globe. Have you ever thought about what she would tell us as a leader? Gandhi, Patton, Kennedy. You could on and I could have put 1,000 pictures up there. The point is, do you think through what is it about these people? What makes one successful, the other not so successful? If two people are successful but they seem to be very different, why is that? The good news, folks, is there's an enormous universe of possibilities to be successful as a leader. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to be male or female. You don't have to be young or old. You don't have to be rich or poor. You don't have to live here or live somewhere else. You don't have to be from humble backgrounds or from rich backgrounds. Leadership is a science, an art form, and a calling that's open to everybody. So, as I've said, I believe that throughout my career, I would identify it as the critical link in corporate success, organizational success. It is the difference maker. If you're in the military, it's obvious what that difference is. The difference is life and death. The difference is winning and losing conflicts of enormous global consequence. The difference is at such a high level, right? And so you have to be quick, you have to be certain, you have to use available information. Sometimes you're doing it at 900 miles an hour, sometimes you're doing it 1 inch at a time, sometimes you're on offense, on defense, but the military has a vested interest in putting the best possible leaders at the point of attack. And therefore, they have developed, and I believe particularly the Marine Corps has developed, certain exceptional tactics, exceptional methods for helping their leaders succeed under tremendous duress. But in business too, business moves today at Mach 2. It's a 24/7 environment. It works around the world. People do stuff overnight in India that affects what happens to you at 4 o'clock in the morning here in Logan. What happens in New York City matters, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, London. It matters what happens in technology and finance and all the rest of it. Leaders are impacted by a host of uncontrollable events and uncontrollable impacts from influences outside of their organization. And how you react to that, how you plan for it, how you deal with it, creates the difference. Putting some context here, there's a group in Atlanta called the Afterburner Group. They talk about business at Mach 2. They're all former fighter pilots. They try to tell you how business relates to what they do in the cockpit. And there is direct analogy. They're dealing with life and death at 1,200 miles an hour, but you're dealing with significant impacts on people's lives, significant amount of money, significant consequences for entire organizations and industries at a 24/7 pace. Absolutely 24/7. They both are in unpredictable, rapidly changing environments. They both will be subject to unanticipated events. They both use complex equipment, technology, information, things that come at them before they are ready to absorb them. They also both get involved with ego, ego, emotion, and judgment. That fighter pilot has some anti-aircraft fired at them, and they react emotionally rather than rationally. That could literally be the end of them. In business, if you have an emotional reaction to a major corporate or industry event, it could be a significant negative event for your corporation. And both of these environments require precise coordination amongst a whole variety of unrelated parties. Obviously, if we're dropping ordnance from an airplane, you'd better have coordinated with who's on the ground, where they're situated, and how they're protected. In business, if you're going to make a major market initiative decision, you'd better understand how it affects the other divisions in your company, the other players in your industry, and whether the market is ready to receive what it is you're doing. The environments are similar, if not under difficult and different circumstances, but the environments are very similar. Today, I want to focus on the middle of what the military refers to as the leadership pyramid. If you think about building an organization for success, you're the leader, you're going to deal with a bottoms-up pyramid of investments. People, number one. We're not going to so much talk about people today. That goes without saying. Hiring, recruiting, getting the best people is an essential. But we are going to talk about what you do once the people are on board. We're going to talk about military methods in their application for culture, standards, vision, strategy, planning and training those individuals, and then executing the tactics that you decide need to be implemented. What is it that the military does that we're going to translate to the business world? And why connect it? Why is it even relevant to consider what General Mattis is thinking about as Secretary of Defense when you consider what a CEO is considering for a major corporate decision? Why is that even relevant? Right? It's relevant for a reason that I'll put up a second. When you think about the airline industry, who changed the airline industry? Common wisdom. Who changed the nature of the airline industry? Southwest. Right? Pretty acknowledged. They changed the whole industry. How did they do it? What was the key factor that let Southwest change an entire industry? And I'll put a hypothesis out for you because it's too awkward for all of you to give the same answer at the same time. Right? The hypothesis is up until the time that Herb Kelleher launched Southwest, Delta, American, in those days TWA, Eastern, Pan American, all the airline companies benchmarked themselves against each other. And ladies and gentlemen, I would assert that being less crappy than the competition is no aspiration of excellence. But that's what the whole industry was doing. Delta said, we get a plane out 10 minutes faster than American. Yeah, but American took an hour and 40 minutes to get their planes out. Why does that make you successful? What did Herb Kelleher do? He came in and blew up the whole industry. He said, nonsense. I don't care about the airline industry. I don't care what everybody's done in the past. They're all going bankrupt. They're all out of business. They're all struggling financially. No shareholder returns. I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to benchmark the best possible performance I can find for the things that'll impact my business. And so what did he do? The legendary Herb Kelleher sent his operational people not to observe what TWA was doing. He sent them to the Indianapolis 500. And he said, if you can change 4 tires, feed a driver, clean a windshield, fuel a car, discuss strategy, and put that all together in 17.2 seconds, how come it takes us an hour and a half to turn around a plane? Right? So the simple concept for you to think about, not just in this forum, but throughout your entire learning process, is outside the conventional wisdom. It's not about what the airlines did to each other that generated mutual destruction. It's about benchmarking legendary success wherever you find it. And the hypothesis for this morning is that in many things that stagnate business, many things that frustrate shareholder returns, many things that employees don't like about their current circumstances, result from business leaders benchmarking themselves against other business leaders. You know, our share price is up 4% this year. That's better than yours. Yours is only up 3%. Yeah, but what if it should be up 20%? What if your people could achieve more than they ever thought possible by virtue of your inspiration and leadership? And what we're going to look at now is maybe, just maybe, how does the Marine Corps inspire, train, motivate, and achieve those results through its leadership in an environment where the consequence of failure is so dire and so dramatic? How does that happen? You know, a couple of definitions just for thought. Military leadership is really the art of making life and death decisions with imperfect information and inadequate time while under mental and physical duress. Right? But business leadership, went the wrong way. business leadership the art and science of making high consequence, personal, financial, operational, commercial decisions with inadequate information, inadequate time, and mainly under physical and mental duress. When I've made these remarks to some other people, I get pushback on the physical duress. Come on, we're in an air-conditioned room, we're comfortable seats, we've all had breakfast. What do you mean physical duress? I get up at 4 o'clock on Monday morning. I've been in 3 states, 4 different beds, 3 different time zones this week. I haven't had a regular meal since Sunday, and thank goodness the hotel bed was comfortable last night. I actually got a good night's sleep, but you never know, right? You'll move in business. You move across countries, across time zones, across cities. You work 18-hour days, 20-hour days. You don't get good night's sleep. You think about stuff. All of a sudden, the next day, your subordinate brings in a major issue for leadership, decision, and action. You have to understand that your physical, as well as your mental and moral preparation for business leadership, is an essential component. Right? So with those definitions having been said, it really, really, really does matter what the leaders do. Let's dive into that. Let's consider the paradox that is the Marine Corps. Right? Now, play a game with me. You are all now the commandant of the Marine Corps. You're the senior-most leader in the Marines today, 242 years after the organization has been founded, and you have the responsibility for putting highly motivated, highly trained, highly energized Marines into life and death situations and ensuring that the outcome is what the country, the president, the citizens of that country expect. And you're going to do it through an incredible paradox, right? Because the Marine Corps pays minimum wage. Everybody says you can't get the best employees unless you're paying top dollar. Oh yeah? Anybody want to hazard what a private first class under 2 years of seniority in the Marine Corps makes today? The number starts with a 2. Okay? So pays minimum wage. And yet the Marine Corps has achieved legendary success from the time they were writing battle orders with feathers dipped in ink all the way up to the time where we have iPads that have GPS that can drop ordnance in a 3-meter radius from dozens of miles away, right? They have 80% turnover. We worry in our organizations if we lose 10%, 15%, it's a crisis. Industry benchmarking, you stink as a leader, you had 10% turnover. They program 80% turnover within 4 years. Why? Because that's the length of a contract, and not everybody re-ups. So you have incredible turnover, and yet they have had consistent values, consistent performance, consistent brand reputation for 242 years. They provide leadership training to 18-year-olds. We worry about whether 18-year-olds are worthy of being left in a cubicle with a checklist for more than an hour unattended. The military has 18-year-olds running fire teams through the streets of Fallujah at 2 in the morning, right? And yet, they're providing that training to people who will be with them less than 4 years and where they know there's going to be this incredible turnover and therefore their consistency is always at risk. They don't have very many amenities in the Marine Corps. You're signing up, you know in advance, somebody's going to yell at you, somebody's going to not give you very much sleep, you're going to eat lousy food, you're going to be sent to places with sand and dirt and snow and wind and rain and heat. You know, you're going to live in a metal rack if you're lucky, you're going to sleep on a canvas cot if you really got luxury quarters, or you're going to be sharing a shelter half with some other human being in 10-degree temperatures where you get to know each other a lot better than you wished, right? But that's what they do. They don't provide amenities. There are no bonus programs. There isn't, you know, stock options. There isn't a health club. They don't offer on-site daycare, right? And yet, that harsh operating environment has produced amongst the services the highest retention rate. It has produced the fewest claims for injury and harassment and other anomalies that the government would recognize. And they do it with significant diversity. Sometimes we look to make everybody in a company look like us, sound like us. We want to homogenize our company. The Marine Corps is incredibly diverse, right? The whole gamut of society is represented in the Marine Corps, and yet the esprit de corps of that unit on any given day in any given place around the world is legendary. So can we just think for a moment that just perhaps it's not the pay, it's not the benefits, it's not the bonus program, it's not the amenities, it's not the office, it's not the view, although this is lovely, right? What is it? Those people are motivated to work for the Marine Corps because of something else. And it's what the leadership, the aura, the brand of the Marine Corps has represented for 242 years, right? They've established a culture. First non-delegatable function of a leader, you must establish the culture of your organization. You must determine the environment in which your people will operate. They have done that brilliantly, right? That you have to have, again, a non-delegatable obligation of leadership. You have to have a set of values, a strategy, and a direction that's understandable, repeatable, and can be absorbed by the rank and file of your business. How many companies do you walk in the lobby or you walk in a meeting and it's just apparent that this place is adrift, right? That's a leadership failure. They haven't attended to the first and second non-delegatable functions of a good leader, culture and values and strategy, right? They have trained to exercise judgment in making decisions. And let's reflect on that for a second, because at the end of the day, all of you as leaders will make decisions. You'll have to use judgment. What is judgment? Judgment is passing the need for action through the entirety of the filter system that you personally bring to that moment in time. And the reason the Marine Corps takes those 18-year-olds and trains them so relentlessly and exposes them to leadership and teaches them how to use every different weapon we have and gives them exposure to motor transport and communications and artillery and all the rest of that is so under pressure, inadequate information, physical, mental duress, the judgment that that individual Marine will exercise is as good as it could possibly be. But think about the organizations you know. How many of them train people to that level? How many of them actively seek to expose the employees that they've hired, let's say for sales? How many of them actively expose them to warehouse operations, shipping, admin, finance, customer service, quality, safety? How many organizations understand that what really makes the difference at the point of attack every day is the judgment their people bring to the need for action? And the Marine Corps has established a policy of demanding that things get done. How many times you go into a meeting in a business environment and the outcome is, well, we'll carry this to the next agenda, or this will be a carryover item, or we'll defer this for a month because they couldn't get the information to us on time. They tolerate, I don't want to say malfeasance, but they tolerate negligence, tolerate delay, tolerate all those negatives that undermine the reason why people love to work for the Marine Corps. If you go to Paris Island, you know in advance you're going to get stuff done, right? You go to Quantico, you know you're going to be trained to get stuff done. Leaders have to understand what an enormous motivator achieving simple things is to the people that work for that organization. And yet business leaders do not attend to it. Not all. I'm not trying to paint the entire economy with one brush, but you get my point. The failures that we observe, there is no culture that's been defined. There are no expectations. There is no relentless training. There is no attitude and motivation that things get done. That is why people work for the Marine Corps. That's why they can't wait to sit next to another Marine in a challenging environment, because they know instinctively they have each other's back. What's one of the biggest complaints in American business? Employees feel alone. They feel aloof. They don't feel any sense of teamwork. They feel like the other employee is trying to claw over them to get to the top. They're like lone wolves. How is an organization going to succeed if everybody is in it for himself or herself, right? So it is important that we as future business leaders understand the full range of what we're trying to do, develop the skills, and get our minds in context of those non-delegatable things that you're going to want to do. So let's talk in a bit of detail about 3 specific areas the Marine Corps teaches us important lessons. Setting the culture, the primary and shared values that bind the organization, planning and decision making, the reason that stuff doesn't get done in business. How can we get better organized? What are the thoughts, tactics, strategies we can use? And then when we have made a decision, how do we implement it? Another major complaint, you're all aware of it, American business. What do employees say? I hate it because I get told what to do. I don't feel like I can use my creativity. They don't ask me for my opinion. So we're going to look in detail at the paradox of the military. Everybody thinks the military is a tops-down environment. Everybody thinks you give orders. Everybody thinks it's so demanding and organized, and it is just the opposite. When it's hitting the fan at 3 o'clock in the morning out in the desert, you don't have time to ask corporate purchasing if we can have some more ammunition. Right? You don't have time for that kind of bureaucracy. The irony of what the military teaches you is that to win, you have to let go. To win, you have to drive authority down. To win, people have to be empowered. Let's look at how they do it and how it might benefit business, right? The culture, as I said, is your responsibility as a leader, and if you don't define it, it's going to be defined for you, either by employees, by customers, by suppliers, by competitors, by the government. It will be there. The question is it yours or is it someone else's? So in setting the culture, what are the values? One of the first things I did when I got to North American Plastics was sense that we didn't have that glue. And so we put on the back of every business card of every employee in all 87 locations what our values are. And our values are honesty and integrity, hard work and continuous self-improvement, and empowerment at all levels. And we tell every new employee that comes to work for us, those are the values. And if you ever see anybody in this organization leading you in a way that undermines those values, I personally want to know about it, because that's not our intent. That's not how we win. That's not how we succeed. So you must define it. You have to define who gets in. Who gets in the fence line of your organization should be a matter of intense jealousy, right? Because what are you doing? When you hire someone, those of you that are already there are letting that person share in what they find as pre-existing benefits, culture, opportunities, and so forth. You can't just give that to anybody. So hiring should be conditional. Has that person proven that they have the ability to adopt the values, live the culture, and so forth? I think if you ask me one sentence to define successful and unsuccessful business organizations, I would say that the successful organizations have senior leadership that has a purpose larger than its ego. And I would put that one element above all others in that list. If you as a leader decide that you're in it for praise, glory, accolades, money, recognition, awards, all the rest of that, you're going to fail. Because your people will not like that, they will be jealous of you, they will resent you, and they will find ways to undermine you. The challenge of leadership, should you aspire to it, is to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if I'm doing it to help other people get better, if I'm doing it to generate shareholder return, if I'm doing it to make the industry, the community, the world a better place through the development of our products, then you have a fighting chance. But if you're in it, as people at Enron were, as people at so many other selfish organizations were, if you're in it for personal gain, it ultimately doesn't work. You've got to demand hard work and perseverance. It's the old athletic analogy, right? The harder I work, the luckier I get. Holds true in business. Demonstrate integrity and accountability. Read the story of Dwight Eisenhower at 4 p.m. on June 5th, 1944, talking to the 101st Airborne Division with a letter he had already written to Franklin Roosevelt resigning from the United States Army because the landings had failed. That's accountability, right? That's what you need to drive in your organization. And expect consistency. Nobody likes to have balls and strikes called one way today, another way tomorrow. The military has legendary consistency in how they call balls and strikes. All right? Planning and decision making. Once we have a culture that we like, people are motivated, they're inside the fence line, we've attended to all of those atmospheric conditions, how do we plan and make decisions? Speed is a virtue. I see organizations all over the world, my suppliers in particular, slowing themselves down with bureaucracy, international intrigue, structure, relationships of reporting, all the rest of it. A good plan now, implemented quickly by a good team, is far better than a perfect plan 2 months from now. Speed's a virtue. Maintain situational awareness. How many organizations don't share information amongst their people? You must develop a culture where information is driven down to everybody that needs to know. Span of control. Legendary rule in the Marine Corps is 3. 3 people report to a fire team leader, 3 fire team leaders to a squad leader, 3 squad leaders to a platoon leader, 3 platoon leaders to a company leader, on and on it goes, right up the chain of command. How is the span of control in your organization set to bog people down or to speed people up? One of your direct reports has 17 people reporting to them, you are set up for failure. You've got to have the courage to adjust the span of control. Authority on demand. Who does the planning in your organization? It's fascinating when somebody that sits in a tower in Chicago is planning strategy for a market in Florida or any other combination you want to think of. I've got suppliers who have executives that sit in Europe and plan strategies for United States sales. What? What? With all due respect to the French, what? Right? It would be as though we were planning for distributing in France. I couldn't do it, right? But where's it being done in the organizations you're familiar with? Is it being done down close to where the action is, or is it being done in the tower? You've got to plan close to the action. You've got to use a SMEAC, which is a 5-paragraph order designated in the Marine Corps. You've got to use some repeatable, understandable way to get a direction to your folks. What is it that you do? Here's our product, here's our value proposition, here's our logistical channel, here's how we're going to sell. Whatever those steps are, you've got to define them, you've got to give them to your people, you've got to ask that they be used across the organization so that you get consistency, repeatability. You can't have it happen because everybody wants to do it their own way. And the greatest word I've heard in 37 years in business is hope. Well, I hope sales are going to go up next week. I hope I'm going to meet quota next year. I hope my supplier will have enough product for us next month. I hope the competition doesn't cut the price. And all I want to leave you with is an irrevocable thought from the Marine Corps is that hope is not an action plan. Okay? Hope has nothing to do with it. What are you going to do about it? And drive that into your planning. Don't let people say, I think this is what's going to happen. I hope this will happen. We're kind of planning on that. That's not acceptable. That's not what you want to do as a leader. It's not what the military does. In terms of planning, here's how fighter pilots do it. I was always impressed, a quick anecdote, the Afterburner Group, Air Force pilots, F-15 Fighting Falcon, 1,400 miles an hour, 5 miles above the earth, over the North Atlantic. The water's about 31 degrees. It's dark at night. And they have a checklist for fire in the cockpit. I don't know about you, but in that circumstance, if I look down and my trousers are on fire, I'm not thinking about a checklist. I'm thinking about where's the old handle, right? I'm out of here, right? But of course, the point is, if you pull the handle, the tail fin will cut you in half before you're even anywhere near clear of the plane. So the checklist says you slow the plane down, you pitch it low to the right, and you eject out to the side so that the plane doesn't cut you in half, right? But in business, how often do you observe corporations that either in terms of their annual, quarterly, monthly, individual, customer, supplier, or any other cycle that they have to execute, do they do that? Do they actually plan? Do they use checklists? Do they brief their people? Has everybody been trained? Do they have what they need? Do we know how to command and control the organization and the situation? Do we debrief our victories and our failures? Right? That's the kind of organizational consistency that will have people buying into what you're doing as a corporate leader. You've got to have a repeatable cycle. You've got to go back and challenge, why did we win? Why did we lose? Was everybody prepared? And hold yourself accountable. That's what the military does. That's what the Blue Angels do. That's what fighter pilots do. That's what ship commanders do. Do you think anybody debriefed the 2 Navy ships that had the collisions in Asia? Yeah. And of course, what happened there? You talk about accountability. What happened to the commanding officers of the 2 ships that were involved in those collisions? They were relieved of duty with adverse consequence, right? Their careers are over. How many times in business do we see somebody tank a corporation and what happens? They get a golden parachute. They get $25 million and they get an opportunity to have, they can't use the private jet every day. They can only use it 3 or 4 times a quarter. Oh, the hardship, right? But where's that accountability? Do employees want to work for a company that when the boss fails, he gets a private jet and a $25 million pension? Or do they want to work for an organization where if there's failure of leadership, there is accountability? And that may sound harsh, but when you aspire to leadership, you're asking to sit at the top of the pyramid. And I often remind people in our organization, when you apply to do that and you actually make it there, let me tell you, the point is pretty sharp when it's shoved up your ass, okay? It's a lonely place, but it's what your employees expect. It's what they will respond to. It's the difference between cynical, disattached, unmotivated folks and people who can't wait to come to work every day. I went to work in the Marine Corps on active duty every day for 7 years, and it was a pleasure to go to work every day. I couldn't wait to get into the work environment. Everybody you met, how you doing this morning? Outstanding. How you doing this morning? All this, and we get paid too. You know, it was just an outrageously positive environment of people that had common purpose, confidence in the system, and couldn't wait to perform their part in perpetuating it, okay? Once we have a plan, how are we going to execute and direct it? And again, the takeaway point from this busy slide is delegate, decentralize, drive it down. You cannot be fast if you have an excess structure. You cannot be fast if 3 people have to make a judgment before something can happen. Authority on demand is the term the military and the Marine Corps would use, right? Do the people that need to make the decision have the authority to do it? And when you think about it, that squad's walking through an urban environment in the dark, suddenly a whole firefight erupts. What are you going to do? You're going to say, oh, everybody sit down, I'm going to call home, see what they want us to do. Well, truth be told, the military is getting a little too close to that for comfort now in some circumstances. What you want to have happen is that squad leader starts giving direction based on his judgment, which is the result of a lot of training and a lot of exposure and a lot of experience, and you start moving the pieces around. So when your sales force is deployed out in the field and they're supposed to launch a new product for you, but the competition cuts the price and your customer doesn't want to buy, are they going to sit in the parking lot and start calling layers within an organization? Or are they going to go back in and redefine who they are, who your company is, and what your product does for that customer? Right? Are they going to take authority, discretion? Are they going to act in a motivated, confident way because of what you, the leader, have set up? Or are they going to say, how do I cover my butt for this failure? How do I syndicate this to get some other people in the swamp with me? Right? That's not what you want. But it is a function of what leaders set up, expect, and support as to how your people will react. There's a big problem in business today, and that is we are all normal human beings, and as such, we love to surround ourselves with people that are like us. We love people that reinforce our decisions because we love to be told we're right. I love it when somebody says, you know, boss, that's the greatest plan I've ever heard. Well, of course it is. I thought of it. Well, of course it is. We love that, but it's wrong. Right? What you want is you want people that are tough, cynical, critical, evaluative. You want people to look at what you're about to do and prevent you from hitting the abutment, not drive you into it at full speed without skid marks. Right? Talk about Jocko's rule. A few years ago at our PCM meeting, we had Jocko Willink come and present. Name ring a bell for anybody? Chris Kyle, American Sniper. Jocko Willink was his commanding officer in Ramadi in 2006. And so Jocko was talking about the lessons for business leadership from an urban combat environment. And one of his primary lessons, and Phil will know this, he was there, right? One of his primary lessons was no yes men. Get all of his subordinates around the sand table. Here's the plan. What's wrong with it? How many corporate executives produce a strategy? Do you hear them say to all of the division presidents or all of their sales executives or whatever the case may be, here's what I think. Tell me what's wrong with it. I demand that you tell me what's wrong with this plan. How would you defeat it? How would you attack it? What would you do if you were the other guy? Right? We don't do that. We're not comfortable with that. We want to be reinforced rather than challenged. Want a primary lesson from the military to apply to business? Surround yourself with people that will challenge you and then have the courage to accept that critique, discern what is relevant and not relevant, and act on it. Your people will be motivated as hell if they think they have the chance to actually prevent a problem, because when it goes wrong, who's the first that's going to get hit? It's not you. You're the guy with the $25 million bonus and the private jet once a quarter, right? It's the poor guy that loses his job down in the factory floor when you got to cut back personnel, right? So they want to tell you what's going to go wrong because they want the company to succeed. Be somebody that has the courage to accept critique and to encourage it. And of course, it's all about, have you cross-trained relentlessly? Have you prepared your people for everything they might encounter? famous question that they asked General Mattis, you know, what keeps you up at night? I really admire the guy because in his position, he honestly said nothing keeps him up at night. He actually keeps other people up at night. God, I wish I could be like that guy. It's so good. Actually, a brief anecdote. This is when General Mattis was the commanding general of Marine forces that were going to Iraq when I was in the reserves. I'm in his chain of command. And not for editorial impact, but just to give you a point, observation of how crystal clear he is in his communication. He distributes the rules of engagement for troops deploying to Iraq. I happen to be one of those that would get that communication. First rule of engagement in Iraq: if it's worth shooting once, shoot it twice. Ammo is cheap, Marines aren't. Now, if you're part of his company, if you work for this guy, and he says that to you, what do you think? What do you think about this guy? Wow, I can understand him. He doesn't mince words. He's got my back. He understands what I'm going to face. He's willing to support what I need. He has communicated 10 virtues that make the Marine Corps special in the context of one simple rule of engagement that he wasn't trying to be overly clever with. In fact, he was trying to be damn practical with. But how many corporate executives give direction to the sales force, the factory floor, the corporate office with that degree of clarity, support, intent, and purpose, right? That's what you take away from looking at what the military does. Can you be that future business leader that speaks with such clarity, such intent, such honest purpose to support the people that are doing the dirty work in your organization? John Huntsman. My chemical company used to buy a lot of stuff from John Huntsman. That picture was in this week's Wall Street Journal. Do you want to talk about leadership by example, and would you follow him into a difficult circumstance? That poor son of a gun is in 31-degree water in the Soviet Union, having been called out by one of the cultural organizations there, the Orthodox Church, as to whether he would join in the celebration of the Epiphany. I really enjoy getting in 31-degree water, don't you? But he faced a moment of truth, and what did he do? He jumped right in. There's a great lesson from this town for leadership in business and what the military wants to be like John Huntsman. When you're faced with a moment of truth, this way or that way, what do? Do you run or do you attack? You jump in, you jump out. Do you say yes, you say no? That is a fantastic one-picture example of leadership by example, the military way that America business could do more to absorb. So here's I got a couple of slides. I'll just leave these up. If you join the Marine Corps, you go to OCS, your drill instructors, in very eloquent and forceful terms, leave you with the thought that these are the traits that you must exhibit every day. And of course, that's the military, and I'm not trying to draw a straight line to business, but think about how employees would react across our economy if they came to work every day and they looked at leaders who exhibited bearing, courage, decisiveness, dependability, endurance, initiative. Things got done. We get things organized. We present ourselves to the world in a way that we can all be proud of what we do. We talk about North American plastics, and it's a sheet of plastic. It's fun. We go to recruiting events. We have some samples on the table, and I go up to students and I say, yeah, pretty sexy, huh? Sheet of acrylic on a table. Could you get into that? Does that motivate you? And of course, I said, what if it was the canopy of an F-35 fighter jet? What if it was a skull transplant that enabled somebody to recover from a massive car accident? Right? So the thing is, if you exhibit these traits, if you turn negatives to positives, if you create that culture, if you are dependable, if people trust you, you can then start to perform at a level that American business would admire and leaves open such opportunity for growth and success. Right? In addition to the traits, there's a few other thoughts that they leave with you. But again, it's all simple academic stuff. But would American business be better off if people sought and took responsibility for their actions instead of passing the buck or trying to blame somebody else? What do we see every night on the news? When we get these headlines from Washington, for example, what's the primary method that's being employed today? Duck and cover. Somebody else's fault. I didn't do it. Their responsibility. It's the damn Republicans. It's the damn Democrats. Doesn't matter. You know what? You're all at fault. Pox on all your houses. Right? The reality is nobody's taking responsibility. The reality in business is it doesn't happen often enough. And sure, assigned tasks are understood. How many times do you get directives in business that are these long-winded memos with mamby-pamby fluff stuff that nobody, I can't understand. How's a shop operator going to understand it? Instead of crystal clear, shoot it once, shoot it twice. Right? That's stuff you can understand. All of that. So these two lists are simply illustrative of what the Marine Corps demands of its people, but American business could do well adopting those traits that can carry over. And therefore, having employees that trusted their leadership, that understood the purpose of their company, that had confidence in the process that their company is putting forward, and that wanted to come to work every day and wanted to win in the marketplace. Because winning is fun. And that's what you want to do. You want to make money and have fun. Don't forget the second part. Right? And of course, in my personal view, this goes beyond business. Think of the applications for what we've just said. If you're the coach of your high school basketball team, if you're in charge of the social group at your church, if you have a community association that you're the current president of, if you're in school here and you're the president of a fraternity or club, on and on it goes. If you're the president of a country club, I don't care what it is. It goes in any organization. If you ponder and reflect on the simple things that we've talked about, that the military does well and lack in the civilian world, we would be better off if more organizations just attended a little bit to what the Marine Corps for 242 years has made an absolute passion out of. I'm not very excited when I talk about the Marines. I hope I haven't been too subdued, but I do, it was a comment that my drill instructor made to me back in June 11th, 4 p.m., 1975, not that I remember the date, time, or place. But, it was about this purpose larger than your ego. I stepped off the bus, and he put his finger right under my chin, and he was about 4'11". Right? He looked like a piece of leather stretched over a stick. And he lifted me right off the ground with one finger. And I thought he was going to break through the bottom of my jaw. And he said, "You know what I got? You know what I got?" I couldn't even speak. And he said, "I have expletive on a stick." Right? And I thought about that in light of General Mattis and all these other things. How much clearer could he have been? Right? Did I understand what I was there to do? Right? How it was going to work. And of course, the message in one simple sentence was, you've asked to do something very difficult. Don't think you know how to do it. You better learn, you better pay attention, you better understand what we're trying to teach you here, because what you've applied to do is extremely difficult. And I would say if all of us who have the thrill of leadership in our bones and our blood, if it's what you want to do long term, if you want to become that leader, start with the understanding that you don't really have it yet. And seek a lifetime of learning, seek a lifetime of art and science of what this is all about. Military is just one small slice. There are hordes of other examples out there. But follow your passion, be humble, have a purpose larger than your ego, and listen to your folks. And success will follow you, I promise. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have time for just a couple questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. When we call on you, stand up and introduce yourself and your major. We won't go very long.
Either that good or that bad, huh? Sir.
So my name is Nathan Scholars. I'm double majoring in business and marketing. So I have a question for you. So my dad is in the Navy, my uncle's in the Air Force. What made you decide on the Marine Corps, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's a humbling question. Thank you for asking it. I'm sure all of you are about ready for some wonderful anecdote that, defends America and all the rest of that. And I will tell you that I got into the Marine Corps as a reaction to what was going on a private liberal arts campus in November of 1974. If you study history, remember that's the tail end of the Vietnam War. And we were doing incursions into Cambodia and Laos. There were a lot of protests, and some of the captures of wisdom in our school had taken over the dean's office and had disrupted classes. There were demonstrations in the courtyard, and I happened to be walking through the student union that day, And there stood Captain K.L. Priestley, United States Corps of Marines, one each, steam cleaned and pressed, underneath a poster, he was there to recruit, underneath a poster that said, "Try out for the varsity." And it was in that moment, I said, I don't want to be like them. I'd rather be like him. And I literally went over and started talking to him. And after 10 minutes of talking to him, I was so impressed with how squared away he was and the clarity that he brought to his purpose and pride and all the rest of it. I signed up. I was an easy sell, but I hated what I saw the other way, because all of life is context, right? It's either this or that, and I chose that. And I've never regretted it for a minute, but not more heroic than that. It was an alternative to people taking over my classroom and depriving me of an education. Sir in the back.
Thank you. My name is Dallin. I'm a business administration major. And the question that I have is, I've been in a few situations in life where I was in a leadership position, but I was surrounded by people who were my senior. Whereas they'd been in my position before, they were older than me, they had more experience in the business that we were doing than me, and yet I was designated at that time to be in a leadership position, having stewardship over them. So in that kind of a situation, what's the best way to go about leading a group of people who are your senior in almost every respect?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Thank you for that. In business today, it's a truism that you're going to face the entire range of age groups, right? You may very well be leading people older than you, more experienced than you, younger than you. Sometimes it's peers. 3 or 4 of you have been in the same position, and then one gets promoted. Now you're leading people that used to be your peers. But I have a suggestion in that regard, because it's really something that every second lieutenant in the Marine Corps faces. If you're in infantry, your first assignment is typically that of a platoon commander. You turn up for the billet, and inevitably there's a platoon sergeant, maybe 2 or 3, a couple of squad leaders in that organization that have been there a lot longer than you have and who know a lot more than you do, and yet you are the commanding officer in charge. And so I think you start, first of all, by acknowledging that. There's no way that you can alter the reality on the ground. They know more than you. You need their help to quickly acclimatize to what you have to do. But the Marine Corps says you're in charge, so they need you to be competent. They need you to make good decisions for the sake of all 42 members of the platoon. And so I approached that by going to Staff Sergeant Navarre and saying, "Hey, Staff Sergeant, I'm really glad they gave me this platoon, because I understand you're one of the best staff sergeants in the entire organization. I need your help. I got to learn quick. I will learn. I'll bust my ass. You're not going to find anybody here before me or that's going to stay later than me. But I need your help, because that way this organization will be successful. Can I count on you?" You got to acknowledge it. You got to go right to them and you got to say, "Hey, I'll work hard for you. Can you work hard for me? Can we make this work?" Right? Now, it's easy in the military because you actually have the authority to make decisions whether the sergeant likes it or not. In the civilian world, the company may say you have the authority to make decisions, but others, through their cooperation or not, may have the ability to frustrate the success of your decisions, right? So I think you have to assess the personalities, but don't ignore it. Don't fail to acknowledge the experience and information and ability that those people have, and emphasize what you're going to bring to the table that they need, so hopefully you get that immediate cooperation that the organization requires. It's a tough situation, but I think that's how you have to do it. You can't abdicate. You can't let them make decisions. It's not a democracy. So how do you handle that? You've got to acknowledge, gain cooperation, and move forward with their help, if at all possible. Sir.
My name is Jeff. I'm a finance major, and you talked a lot about consistency, and I was just wondering, do you have a morning routine that you do every day? Is there consistency that you have each day?
Yeah, I get up at the crack of 3, and no, that's a great question, and there is, and each industry or each business that you get involved in will have its own op tempo, and you have to respond to the realities of that business. But in my world, in our North American Plastics, I typically spend 140 to 160 days a year on the road. So my typical workday was a very diversified experience, getting up in Los Angeles or Moncton, Nova Scotia, or Minneapolis or Miami or Dallas, whatever. So I'm usually a road warrior, tactic. I get up every day sometime between 4:30 and 5:30, and I'll get up immediately. I make myself a cup of coffee, and I will clear emergency emails that came in overnight. We're a global business. I reported to somebody that lived in the UK, so a lot of times the communication and work product would come in over the night. So the first 30 minutes of the day, I would clear off any emergencies, attend to what I had to get organized for the day. I used to go to the workout room at the hotel, but I became pretty disaffected with some of the quality of those places, depending on where you're staying. I used to love to run outside, and then I'd wake up on a morning like this morning, and I'd say, I'm getting too old for that stuff. So I've adopted, I have a regimen of working out for 30 to 40 minutes in the morning. I used to do it at Health Club, run on the roads. Now I have more of a PX90 type of a workout that I hopefully have enough space in my hotel room to execute. I carry bands and other things in the suitcase, and I'll do a high aerobic, lower intensity in terms of weights now with my age, but high intensity flexibility and workout for 30 to 40 minutes. Typically then we've made a schedule. This morning Amy and I started at 7. So by the time you get up at 5, do a half hour of emails, work out for 45 minutes, take a shower, maybe thumb through the newspaper, then you're off and running typically 7 o'clock. But it includes catching up, working out, and prepping for the day carefully, right? Shave every day, make your bed every day, all that kind of stuff. There's a great book, by the way, by a Navy admiral called Make Your Bed that speaks to exactly that. If you want to read it, it's an excellent treatise. Develop a schedule, stick to it, discipline, tremendous part of success.